thrown in jail because people happen to be offended. We need to be able to have conversations without feeling like we're going to say something that gets us thrown in jail because people happen to be offended. We need to be able to have conversations without.
What's up, everyone? Hello, we are live again on this Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Western Time, with our usual and amazing Royal Rumble. Today, we have a few interesting things going on. Well, first of all, there's some new live events we're going to talk about as the show continues. So go to pangburn.com/events and find out where you can go with the show in Vancouver, 2 shows in New York City, and we'll talk about them more afterwards. We're also going to talk about what just happened with Lauren Boebert, that hypocrisy, and the fact it's even the part of media and on the news to begin with, the impeachment inquiry, along with Hunter Biden's indictment, right?
Yeah,
John?
Hunter Biden was indicted
Yep.
for gun charges.
And Russell Brand. And whatever allegations against him, I have no idea. John knows this. But the point is that Daily Dose of Wisdom is going to be our special guest, and they're going to come in about 27 minutes. Until then, you have us, Tart, John, Thomas, and the man from last week, Brett, who we're very happy to have here tonight. We thought he's gonna help us rein in and be focused in our conversations because we're wild dogs without him. So let's talk about Lauren Boebert. What's happening with Boebert? What do you think about it, Tart? Do you even know what's happening?
I have no idea. I've not been paying attention to that. I was reading about all the Biden stuff recently, so that's where I've been focused at. So let John lead this one.
For focusing on matters of actual politics.
I know. Screw me.
Follow the tabloid style side.
No. You go, John. You tell us about all this because you're the one who apparently has all the information.
Well, we can also watch a video on it. I think that will help you. Maybe we'll watch a video on it. Tart. Thomas, do you know what's going on?
No idea.
Oh, God.
Brett, do you know what's going on with Lauren Boebert?
We have to show the video. Is that a thing that we have to do?
Of course we have to show. You cannot be a Republican puppet the whole time.
First Amendment does not protect obscenity. I just want to put that out there.
Okay. Let's put this up. Give me a second.
There's no redeeming.
It's actually insane how nobody knows about it, and for some reason it's like front page for me.
It was front page for me too. I couldn't not see it.
Dude, you know what my front page is all the aliens in Mexico, that whole thing. And I've gone down the rabbit hole when I end up down there.
Okay, let's put this up.
Oh my God.
Oh, there is no audio to this, so we can talk, I believe, over it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just teenager and movie theater behavior, basically.
Yeah. Why is it loading? Why is this doing this to me tonight?
We would have troubles on this night of all nights.
There we go. Tech problems. Oh shit, there it is. I don't know why it keeps freezing on this frame. That makes no sense.
I don't think Evie Mux likes playing video. We had this problem with Vouch as well.
We did as well, right?
Yeah. It was very skippy for the game show. I think Evie Mux just made video.
Yeah, I just put it on the side.
Oh, there we go.
For allegedly groping her date and vaping inside the movie theater, she got kicked out. They originally denied the allegations of, and she was accompanying a male guest, and they were escorted from the theater. So here's a video of them, So here she's vaping her vape in the middle of the movie theater.
Cringe.
And now it's her recording the show on her phone with her flash just freaking out everything. Taking selfies in the middle of a movie theater.
Very silly.
This is giving teenage drunk energy now.
Exactly.
This is the kind of stuff I used to get kicked out of theaters for, but but I was a teenager.
No, she recently got divorced, and this is the new guy apparently. So
he was filling her up. Her hand was in his groin.
Yeah,
they were just going at it in the seats.
The whole thing.
Okay, so yeah, that's the news that we're going to cover.
Oh, that's awkward. That is really awkward. I don't even know what to say about it. I'm just thinking, like, this is the kind of shit that I did when I was a teenager. But she's, how old is she? I don't even know.
But what does this say about the state of
She's
politics in America?
Nothing.
Nothing. This says nothing about the state of politics in America, John.
About politics? I'm sorry. Give me a second. I gotta plug in my laptop. Somebody else make a comment. Make it intelligent. Make it smart.
How about you, Brett? What do you have to say about this?
Okay.
I mean, it's not surprising that the media tends to focus on something that, doesn't really. Is it significant? I mean, yeah, she acted badly, but how many of them aren't acting badly right now?
I mean, do I really care about this topic? No, I do not care. I think it's immature and silly and derpy, but do I actually care that this happened? Absolutely not. I'm just like, okay, so what? So she did some stupid. What do you want me to say about it?
I mean, but do you know how much she's against trans and grooming and kink parades and all of that other stuff? I think that's what people are talking about it because of the hypocrisy.
Yeah,
she's a hypocrite.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I take a little bit of different tact with the word hypocrite. Like, if you think that it's okay for you to do something and not okay for other people to do something, that makes you a hypocrite. It's possible Boebert agrees that her behavior was bad, but just, fell short of her own standards, like all human beings do. I know I certainly preach many principles that I don't constantly live up to, but I know that it's wrong whenever I fall short. Although I will say the fact that like a member of the House, the member of like one of the highest political seats in the land is like vaping in a movie is just like the ultimate doomer pill for me.
Is it?
It's very depressing. Yes.
Because for me, I see that as almost like, oh, that's cool. Someone just like, if someone's like openly just, I vape, right? It's like, I think they don't hide it. They're just who they are. They go and they run for office while vaping, and then they end up vaping in a movie theater. But like, yeah, well, they vape,
You see, I think vaping is bad, so we would have different opinions on this.
But isn't it
less than ideal?
But isn't the problem is not that she vaped? That when she was asked to stop, she was a bitch about it.
Yeah, of course.
And then she was removed, she lied about what was actually going on there. That's the issue, right?
Yeah, of course. Like, you should own up to things when you do them. She shouldn't have been unruly. There's a lot of bad behavior there that's not becoming, especially of somebody who purports to be a conservative. It doesn't mean that she doesn't believe her principles apply to her, but it does mean that she certainly fell short of them in a pretty serious way. Not a great role model moment. Kind of doesn't really matter, but just kind of disappointing. That's
why doesn't it matter though? That's what I'm trying to ask. Why does it really not matter?
Because like when you throw it into like the pot of like all of the other like heinous and immoral stuff that our political class does, like it's just low level. That's all.
But does it mean it's not matter because it's low level? Like it's like,
yeah.
What would you have thought if I don't know, like let's say this was a Democrat, would you laugh? Would you be like, oh, expected? It's indicative of their party and what they're willing. Like, would you feel those sentiments or no?
I would probably be less upset with Democrat. I would laugh at it more because I'm like classic hedonism, but I actually take this much more seriously because this is a failure of living by the rules that you preach and doing so publicly in a very horrible way. I think that this is actually more important than if a Democrat did it. I would say it impacts me more, but both again, like when we're talking about the type of political issues we talk about, like the scale, like the corruption, stuff like that. Like this is like funny and it's like, oh, this isn't great. Like, look how far we've fallen. It kind of serves as a benchmark to show where things are at.
If she was your colleague, let's just say if she was your colleague on the, I don't know, at some sort of a community where you were at school board, and she was your colleague on the school board meeting, and she lied about it and did this and didn't own up to it. What would be your response originally? Would you be upset with her? Which she doesn't represent the people on the school board? Like, what would you?
I would think it's bad. And in the case of the school board, the ceiling for corruption is a lot lower. There's not exactly like mass money laundering or the type of mass corruption going on. So proportionally, I would care more. Right? It sticks out more. I guess that's just my point. It's just all just relative to the context of the type of behavior that we've come to expect. For my school board colleague, I think I probably have this is very sad, but I think I probably have higher expectations of school board colleagues at this point than I do of federal politicians in terms of the behavior that
I'm shocked to hear you say that. I'm shocked to hear you say that.
Not the behavior that I want or the behavior that I would expect in the abstract in a principled way, but in terms of just like on the ground, like which groups of these people are more likely to engage in highly immoral behavior. You know, if there's a school board that I'm sitting on in an area where I would live, you know, I would expect the ceiling to be lower. So it would probably. I
expect the ceiling to be higher in the federal.
What else do you want me to say? Like,
I come from the perspective that I expect the opposite. What does anybody else think? What do you guys think? Do you not care at all? The rest of us are just like Tart's like, nah, this is stupid. Brett, this is stupid.
I mean, my thought is with the vaping and with the school board comments, you know, the fights that go back and forth that go, you know, what are they actually solving? You know, if we were to talk about something like mass shootings, that could lead to better outcomes in society. You know, I'm just glad that Boebert wasn't like smoking a pipe with actual tobacco and chewing a little Big Chief there. I think that would have been a little worse.
Well, what do you think was in that vape? Do you think it was just regular stuff, or do you think
no, there
a little extra? Yeah, based on her behavior, I'm betting she was a little toasty.
Yeah, you think it was Mary Jane?
I'm wondering. I mean, I don't have any evidence towards that, but I'm going like, look at her behavior.
I mean, Donna, if you want, I can give the dissertation on how this Boebert getting fondled in a theater represents the fall of the American Republic. Like, I can give that monologue if you want.
I mean, I just wanted your ideas. You told us what you think. Let's move on to this impeachment inquiry because we're going to finish up the politics early.
Yay!
Does anybody know? Do you guys know about it, Tart? Thomas?
Yeah. I've been reading about this one.
I've been reading about it too. But Tart, take away.
I think it's complete farce. I'm going like, look, when I first heard about it, I was like, okay, well, you know, I'd be interested to find out if Joe Biden was in fact, for anyone in the audience who doesn't know, the idea is they've brought in an impeachment inquiry. The issue is essentially that they're concerned that Joe Biden may be involved with his son Hunter Biden. His son Hunter Biden has had some dealings around the world and earned a lot of money from potentially from having his father be the president in this area. And they're concerned that these dealings may be corrupt. But unfortunately, there's like zero evidence. And when I say zero evidence, I've been digging for 2 days and I can't find a shred of anything. The best they've got is that he met with some foreign officials and played golf. And I'm going like, okay, and they were connected with Hunter Biden. I'm going like, okay, so these were business people that are friends with Hunter Biden who had played golf with Joe Biden. I'd go like, why do I care about this? Impeachment is a serious thing. Like, and usually what happens is when you bring an allegation like this, usually you have the evidence and then you do the impeachment inquiry. Mm-hmm. That's usually the way the order of things. Right now they're going, there might be something, impeachment inquiry, and it's like that's not how that works. Like you actually, if they had something substantial, I'd be totally on their side, going, let's do it. But there's nothing. I can't find anything. What do you know, John? Like, have you seen any evidence?
I think Brett was raising his hand. I have thoughts, but I wouldn't want to cut off my my current favorite member.
No. Sorry. In the educator world, when we do this, it's like silent applause. Like, I agree.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but the point on that the evidence seems very lackluster, which I don't know how we felt about the evidence for Trump a couple years ago when the Democrats tried to do that, you know? So it's like, is this just a political game where we're going to play this dance every single time of trying to impeach the other, right? And then it's just cyclical bipartisan or not? Partisan.
Good question. It's a good question. Glass got broke during Trump's indictment, and it seems to be happening now. To the point of the evidence, you are right that there's a lack of direct evidence. That's very true. However, there is loads of circumstantial evidence. And that circumstantial evidence, people misunderstand what circumstantial evidence means. It doesn't mean it's not real. It just means that it means it's not direct. So most of the evidence actually comes from stuff pulled off of Hunter's phone. So Hunter has texts to loved ones saying he pays half of dad's bills. There's text to his business partners saying that he can get his dad on the phone at any time in like mildly threatening ways. So there's certainly evidence that Hunter was trading on his father's name and using his father's name. The lack of evidence is whether or not Joe was aware of this and endorsed it.
Or participating in it, yeah. Was he participating? Because if he was participating, I totally agree. It's definitely wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how you define our participation, right? Because with a lot of this stuff, it's all very tongue in cheek, and I'm the most benefit of the doubt guy in the world. I agree that they pulled the trigger too early, both because, again, I would like a little bit of direct evidence, but also just on a tactical level, like, why would you not wait until the general? Like, I know how cynical that sounds, but like, there's this side of me which is just like, why would you not just wait till the general election to pull this when it's actually going to be more politically effective? But maybe that's a Machiavellian side of me coming out.
I have a very tactical nature like that too, so I completely relate with that. Like it was definitely dumb timing. I think a lot of that has to do with like, remember Trump. The whole Trump thing was that he wanted the Ukrainian president to launch an inquiry into Hunter Biden, and here we are, a couple of years later, and suddenly the Hunter Biden thing's coming up again. I'm going, I wonder if there's a little Trump handy hand in there.
No, that makes me feel like Trump was right from the get-go, and they shouldn't have gotten impeached for it. Like, the thing is that Hunter Biden has done nothing that would give him the status to walk in the circles that he's walked in, other than the fact that he's the vice president's son. It's very obvious to me that Hunter Biden was doing things, trading on the family name in ways that were almost definitely illegal. Again, we're lacking evidence for it. It's also very hard for me to believe that Joe Biden didn't know about it. That's like, he was completely ignorant. He just loves his son. He had no idea. At the moment, there is reasonable doubt. That is possible, but I would be surprised if that's the case in reality. And I'm looking forward to direct evidence coming out, if it ever does. But I don't think that this case is an absolute farce. I think we just pulled the trigger a bit too early. I think they should have kept doing the inquiries in the House subcommittees until they got more.
I mean, the investigation's not new, right? That's been going on for almost 10 months now, and they've produced nothing. Like it's like, maybe there's nothing to produce, but I mean, if there was something, I'm sure they would have something by now. Like, I would expect after 10 months of investigation, where is the evidence that Joe Biden participated in some sort of like as far as I can tell, his only crime is being a dad. Like, I mean, what did he actually do? He's a dad, and he happenstally is the president.
He had no idea that when he got random calls and was told, "Hey, my business partners are here. Look at this, Dad. Look how I can get you on the phone immediately." That Joe Biden had no idea the unwritten threat. And again,
what do you think of Hunter Biden's character?
Very extremely low.
You think very low of his character, right?
Yeah, of course I do.
Okay, what do you think that a son who struggles with drug addiction, whose brother passed away, what do you think of their character and what they're going to try to do using and leverage the position of their father? Do you think that is something that they would most likely do?
What? Like you mean a boilerplate person who's?
I'm just asking, what do you think of, if you think Hunter Biden this is who they are, right? They're a person.
That's what all the evidence seems to suggest from the messages I've seen. Like, there's no way a guy like that sits on a Burisma board because he just knows so much about natural gas and oil.
I mean, it's called being like an upper class elite. That's what that looks like.
Those families run in circles, and they're all like, I mean, there's not a family out there that's not. If my last name was Biden, I'd probably be wealthy as well. If my last name was Trump, I wonder if I'd be wealthy. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but it's not just about being wealthy. It's about having positions of influence in other people in governments, of being a representative of the government in many ways. I mean, those were two of the charges he was looked at, was for money laundering and for I think falsely representing himself as like an agent to foreign countries.
I mean, he can.
He may have done some of that.
That's wrong.
But that's not Joe. We're talking about Joe Biden's wrongdoings. This is about the impeachment.
And right.
We have to remember. It's sort of like I don't expect. I'm sorry, somebody's talking.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
I was just saying, look, this is about, it has to be something against Joe Biden, not against Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden could be the biggest douche waffle in the whole planet. He can do whatever the fuck he wants. He's not the president. But if we're bringing like an impeachment inquiry, the important part is what was Biden's participation and what was his role.
Three things. First of all, douche waffle, fantastic word. Second thing is the bad stuff Hunter Biden was doing was very obviously involving trading on the name of his father. And in many cases, calling his dad and talking about how he pays his dad's bills. Like, he literally said that he pays his dad's bills using the connections that he only has because he's trading on his dad's influence and last name. Now, I agree with you that at this point, there isn't direct evidence that like Biden like really knew. I agree. That direct evidence has not come out. It might not come out. It might. but there is so much circumstantial evidence that, you know, you've drawn around the shape enough without filling it in that I feel like I kind of know the shape just because you've covered so much of the paper. But what I will say is, this is the angle that we haven't talked about yet, is that Hunter's been investigated for this for 10 months. This is true. They only went after him for a gun charge. The DOJ gave him a sweetheart deal where they prosecute him on the gun charge, get no jail time, and not prosecute him on the other 2 charges. And the judge looked at it and was so amazed that he asked the DOJ, hey, is this deal real? And the DOJ had to backtrack, embarrass, and act like they didn't cut the deal and said, no, that's not what it meant. And then the deal fell apart. Like, there's also a real question here about how hard the DOJ is really going after Hunter, in light of what that deal looked like. Like, it was so bad that a judge literally threw it out. They're like, you think I'm signing this? This is insane.
And if we had like phone calls from Biden and he was pulling strings and doing things, I would be totally in favor of saying, hey, this is corrupt, this is problematic. Right. But if there's not that, who knows? The DOJ, it could have been that he already had so many connections. Maybe he threw threats out there that his father wasn't aware of. Who knows? Greg, you got your hand up. If you want to
this is true. It's 100% possible. It's 100% possible. Just exceedingly unlikely in my mind. But we'll see.
And I think there's a danger, right? An underlying danger that it has to be right and it has to be real of some law that was broken. Because if it continues to go down this thing where the parties are continuously, you know, super contentious and they're trying to do impeachments and stuff like that, we don't want it to go further down the road where there's conspiracy, where there's non-evidence that wasn't actually breaking the law, because otherwise, right, it further erodes that process.
Yep. Conservatives are inherently reactionary. Both of Trump's impeachments were for things that were not really crimes. So the Ukrainian thing, for those who don't remember the ancient history on this, he basically asked Zelensky back before Ukraine was at war, saying, hey, he implied that he wouldn't give military aid unless he looks into the corruption of Burisma, because he suspected corruption and Hunter Biden was sitting on it. That's not really a crime. Although, you know, I see why people...
Yes, it is. I'm pretty sure that's considered a crime. So we do have standards of corruption and those sorts of things. And we have to remember that you can't use your position that way. That is, you cannot do that. Like, that's a type of bribery.
This is the thing with Trump, because it's about intent. Because it's perfectly within U.S. national interest to make sure that the countries that you are sending weapons to are not, you know, allowing major corruption in their government and in their industry. You can make an argument that is perfectly within national interest. Now, there's also the flip side, which is Trump just wants his political opposition investigated. But I seem to remember, with all the Trump indictments, us assuming the good motive instead of the bad motive.
We're missing an important part here. This wasn't just the argument levied. The problem was that he was threatening to withhold military funding approved by Congress. Right?
He implied it. He didn't say.
That's the problem. Brett?
Okay, but with this, we don't think that Biden is being corrupt unless we have direct evidence that he knew and allowed and benefited from, although it's pretty obvious he benefits from his son getting rich, like, inevitably, even if he didn't condone it. We don't take that as a crime unless we have direct evidence that's not just a, you know, implication or a likelihood. In the case of the Ukraine thing, it was just a likelihood. And again, the president does have the authority to withhold.
I mean, I don't think it was. I don't think it was
call. That was the evidence. You have to bring. Say, for instance, I suspect that you murdered someone. Right before I charge you with murder, before we do anything, I have something indicating that there's a relatively high possibility that you did do something unscrupulous or problematic. Right.
Yep.
In this instance, we have evidence that Hunter Biden did some problematic things and may have even said some things and used his father's bully pulpit as if it was his. Right.
Yep.
But what we have to have is not just evidence that he's connected with him. We need evidence that he participated.
I know,
because Joe Biden can't help that he's a dad. He can't help that his son says crazy things, right? But when you bring the charges, when you bring the impeachment inquiry before you have the evidence, that's the problem. With Trump, we already had the phone call. We at least had something and said, hey, here's the problem, and now we need to determine whether or not it was actually problematic and whether or not we need to impeach him over it. It was have the evidence first, and then you do the inquiry.
I want to quickly add to it. I know you're wording, John, but I want to quickly just add to that. that when they did bring someone to speak forward, they attested that the phone calls were indeed like, what's going on with the weather, and it was niceties, and they never talked business. That was the person they brought in, the Republicans brought in to speak. So that's what we have as evidence. Now, do I think keep investigating or follow your investigations? If your constituents want to do that, yeah, push for what they want. Like, that's fine. Go for that.
I agree.
But I would disagree with the tactic of opening up an impeachment inquiry. And I think we can also recognize that what's interesting is that McCarthy, a few weeks earlier, said that, no, we're not going to open an impeachment inquiry. Yeah. And then when the minority voices in opposition in his party decided that, hey, actually, we're going to pressure you over there and not install the government and shut down the government over this, he went ahead and played his political hand. Everything about this is political rather than actually following the evidence.
No, I agree. I 100% agree with this. You will not find a bigger hater on this decision tactically than me. The minority whip in the Republican Party right now is extremely idealistic. They have no sense of strategy or tactics. McCarthy has done a relatively good job of standing up to some of the stuff that they want to do that's just unrealistic. He should not have bent on this. They should have kept investigating using the subcommittee. As you say, Tart, they didn't have direct evidence yet. I will say that sitting at a board meeting saying, I can get my dad on the phone whenever I want. Here, watch. Talk about the weather as just like proof that you can do it.
And Hunter Biden is a douche for doing it. I don't know whether or not Joe. He's a douche for doing that. I don't know whether or not Joe was participative in that.
I know that. That's you got it. I agree.
But you're not speaking as if you know that.
No, I'm saying it looks really bad on Hunter and the types of calls that he was having about talking.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying you're skirted away from the point again. That
if you would let me, we didn't. But
okay,
some nuance. I was going to say that just because they're talking about the weather doesn't exonerate him. This type of phone call in the proper context would be an example of this. However, we don't have direct evidence of that context.
No, but didn't we start? But didn't we start this with the belief, and maybe I misunderstood you, that they did have some type of evidence, even though it was circumstantial.
Yes,
but is that do you think circumstantial evidence warrants an impeachment investigation? And then our guest is going to come in because it's about to be 8:30. So
no, because the impeachment inquiry doesn't actually give you any extra power. Like Congress can, like it doesn't do anything for you except political things. Which, by the way, like I'm at the point where I'm so Machiavellian that like I like winning. So like if they wanted to do it in that way, but they wanted to do it during the general, like I don't care. But they should have waited till they had direct evidence, ideally. Because they didn't have enough evidence. But even if they were just going to do like a cynical political ploy, they should have waited for the goddamn general election. Like doing it now serves no purpose. McCarthy got pushed by his right flank into doing something tactically stupid.
It was
and also probably immoral.
Well, everyone, our guest Daily Dose is here.
Oh, okay. Hello. One last thing on that topic before we move on, though, because I do want to point this out.
Yes.
There's a reason that we are generally speaking against impeachments, and that's why they're so rare in our history, because it actually weakens our executive branch in the eyes of the people, and we work off of a system of checks and balances. It's important that we don't do that unless it's absolutely warranted. In this instance, it makes no sense to even do the inquiry yet because we don't have any. All we have is like hearsay and circumstantial. It's like, no, that's not quite how our system operates.
I agree.
Hey there, Brandon. Welcome on. How are you?
Howdy, doing good.
Wow, you have a great mic.
Good. Is it loud?
Yeah, it sounds great. Your voice is super clear. I love it. So,
great.
If you guys are unfamiliar, Brandon is a popular Christian YouTuber. He goes by Daily Dose of Wisdom. Take a look at his content on YouTube if you're watching. I hope you go over and check out his channel. He does a lot of interesting takes on he has a lot of apologetics, people that he will cover and just do quick videos on. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, Brandon, so that in addition to whatever I've said, that I'm not sure if I've covered everything for you.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's essentially it. My motivation with the channel is to present Christian ideas in a way that is different, I think, from how they've been packaged. I think it's, that it's not different ideas, but it's trying to get around some of what I would call the cultural baggage that I think exists, particularly in America when it comes to Christianity, when it comes to Jesus, God, and Christian ideas in general. And so I'm essentially trying to peel back some of those layers and to present things in a way that will hopefully cause more thought rather than just a knee-jerk reaction against something that we think that we've heard before.
Awesome, awesome. And as far as like your views, why are you a Christian? Did you start off a Christian, or were you raised Christian, or what happened?
Yeah, so actually, I was raised in a Christian family. My parents are awesome, and at the same time, through that, there's a lot of cultural things that get merged in with Christian things. And as a kid, I think it's sometimes hard to really decipher what is just a cultural practice versus what is actually a part of Christianity. And so some of that led me to, when I was like 19, 20, and 21. Um, the word now that everyone uses is deconstruct, but that wasn't really a word at that time. And it's just, I would just describe it as taking everything, putting it on the table, and asking myself the question, where am I actually at with all this? What do I actually myself believe? Not just what have I inherited from my parents' religion. So I went through a few-year long process of wrestling with ideas, but also I would say wrestling with God himself through trying to understand these different things and square a good number of different circles. And interestingly, somewhere along the way, I had a one, and then two, and then many multiple, personal encounters with Jesus that mixed with the truth claims became extremely compelling and ultimately undeniable. And so my story is interesting because it's sort of a there and back again story. But really my story itself is a part of the reason why I'm compelled to share where I'm at publicly, because I think that a lot of people have been there and have gone back, but have not been back again, if you will. And so part of what I'm doing is I do have a heart for the deconstructed Christian, the person who has, to put it the way that G.K. Chesterton did, thinking that they have tried Christianity and that it has been found wanting, when in reality, I would say that they actually haven't tried it in the first place.
Interesting. One of the reasons I wanted to chat with you, I was watching your channel. I've been following you for a while on YouTube. So,
Oh,
but I
right
was
on,
watching
man.
your channel. I love your content. I think it's really awesome. I do think that you have a different kind of message than what I see in most of the standard Christian YouTubers, which I really appreciate that. I don't really like most standard Christian YouTubers. I wanted to talk about a topic with you, and I wanted to get your take on it. I hope it's not an overly standard cookie cutter answer, because the the idea is that I was watching the way I stumbled on your channel was actually, this is about 2 or 3 years ago. I was watching different channels that were talking about the fall of the church. Church attendance has been falling over the past couple of decades.
Hmm.
It really fell down back in, I think, 2020 was the first time in history that it's ever been that the majority of Americans no longer identify with the specific church.
Hmm.
None of them are and don't have regular church attendance.
Hmm.
And I was watching videos going like, well, why do are Christians waking up to what people are saying? Like, I think there's predominant issues that are coming up and that are being largely ignored by the standard congregations. And I want to know, why do you think that church attendance is falling? Why is it? What would be your answer? Why is church attendance falling, and why are most people no longer a member of a church anymore?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that it isn't falling globally. It's not
Yeah.
falling in the global south. It's not falling in Asia, Africa, South America. It's exploding actually there. And in particular, I think of the Chinese underground house church movement that has absolutely exploded in the last 50 years and is still continuing to do so. So the question becomes, what is it about the global north? And Europe is usually 10 or 15 years ahead, but now we're seeing just what you described in America. And so the question is, what is it that's happening here? What are the factors within our cultural context that are bringing this about? And why is that not happening, for example, in those other places that I described? And I do think it's a relatively complicated answer, but I think it can basically be distilled down as well, that we are impacted by our history, and in particular, America is now very much of a post Enlightenment project society, right? Meaning that there's a very strong roots in America through the Enlightenment project that have humanist roots as well. And through that is this dominant, I guess you could say, narrative or belief that has been, I think, subconsciously, even like if you're just born in 2023, you probably don't even realize the extent to which you have subconsciously adapted the view that science is a proper holds rather proper explanatory power for everything. That's an American. So if you believe that, then many of the things within Christianity become unbelievable by default. If you believe that science is a sufficient modality to explain everything in the human experience, everything in reality, then you read the Bible through that lens and you think, well, this is ridiculous. What are we talking about? Whales and resurrections, and this is silly, right? You see, so I think that's a huge factor, is and ironically, the pioneers of the scientific revolution in terms of the people actually doing the science were Christians. Some were also deist, and they were actually motivated by their belief in God. And they actually, this is Albert Einstein says that the only truly incredible thing about the universe is that it's credible, or the crazy thing is that it makes sense, that it actually, the parts fit together into a whole. So it's ironic that although the pioneers of the scientific revolution were motivated by their belief in God to put these pieces together and come about with these tremendous discoveries, the wake of that Enlightenment projects, which is basically downstream from the hard sciences and the hard scientific revolution, the philosophical claim that science can explain everything, I think that is at the core of why, for some who don't have education or context, or in particular have not really been given exposure to Christian ideas, or even more so to the point, have not had exposure to God himself, if you're brought up in an education system that tells you that, you know, you're a byproduct of an ape and there's nothing else to it, there's nothing that makes you uniquely there's nothing unique about humans, nothing that's special about humans, we're just matter in motion, we're accidents, that narrative will rub right up against the Christian narrative. And so it is a story.
I mean, but I have to interject a little bit just on that point.
Please.
Real quick.
Yes.
Is that we don't learn that you're just an ape at your biology class. You learn that you are an ape that can create and love and creates art and finger paintings and has civilization that dates back thousands of years, where they've done great accomplishment like beat disease, starvation, learn about the world, understand it. The narrative is not that you're just an ape. The narrative is that while you do all of those amazing things, you are still an animal. And that's an entirely different thing, because that's not the narrative that's passed across. I don't know what biology textbook you're opening or history textbook you're opening from a public education standpoint.
Yeah, so the distinction between what you're saying and what I'm saying is that I'm talking about ontology and you're talking about function. So functionally, yes, we have done many great things, but ontologically, the claim is that there's nothing more to us than matter.
I don't think that's an assumption. Like, for instance, I'm a methodological naturalist, so I'm not a metaphysical naturalist, but I am a methodological naturalist, which means that methodological naturalism, for anyone in the crowd who's in the audience who doesn't know what that means, it's basically the position that one of the ways in which we gain knowledge about the universe is through naturalistic assumptions. So basically, what we do is we assume that the explanations are some sort of causal relationship. Some naturalistic explanation is going to be the best explanation because it's going to be most parsimonious. Those sorts of things. Now, that doesn't commit you I think there's a kind of a false dichotomy you're drawing there. You're saying that you're either a physicalist materialist or you're some kind of a theist. There's a lot of examples of idealists who are not physicalists about the universe, but they are not theists. Bernard of Kastrup, Schopenhauer, a number of these philosophers are just not theistic, right? So just the mere assumption, like you can be a physicalist. I don't think there's major issues with it. I just don't know whether or not I have a view on it personally. But you can be a physicalist and be potentially some kind of a theist, right? Like you might believe in some kinds of gods, not the kind of God you're talking about, but there might be some kinds of gods that you could be a physicalist and believe in.
Meaning like an idol? Is that what you mean? Like a wooden physical idol
like
that you
Zeus.
worship?
Like Zeus could be a physical being. They didn't believe, like the Greeks didn't believe Zeus created the universe. They believed he occupied a portion of the universe, that he ruled it, that he was in control of it, but he didn't create it or anything like that. And so he could be a physical being in theory.
Yeah, I think though that the topic that we had originally started with just shifted somewhere along the way.
Yeah,
because
it did. Sorry, we digress.
No, that's great. But I want to trace that back for a second, because we were talking about what is a human, and then we shifted to what is the nature of the universe. And I do think that there's a distinction there that's important. So maybe you guys can help me understand you're saying it's not just physicalism or naturalism or theism, but when it comes to answering the question, what is a human? I don't think that's a false dichotomy. I think that we either are more than matter or we are not more than matter. But maybe you guys can help me square that.
I'm actually just to interject here briefly is that I'm on your side. Part of my journey towards more of a faith-based way of thinking has been the realization that I don't believe that human beings are just meat puppets run by electrical currents. It's not how I act. It's not what I really think about people. When I understand the science of why people might think that, but when I think about what I truly believe, it's not what I believe. Now I'm aware it's not exactly the most scientific thing in the world, but that was kind of one of the things where I'm like, I think there's probably more to people than just a very sophisticated ape that is slave to cause and effect. I think that there's such a thing as free will, such a thing as a sacred spark in human beings that doesn't exist in other animals. And I think it's important to believe that, or at least to act like you believe that, to be Petersonian about it. So
yeah. And what I would say that's interesting is that people do act like we believe it naturally, whether. So this is one of the interesting points that I think I wanted to bring up.
I think it's to go down that line that we act if we believe it. I think there are people who genuinely don't believe it, but who don't act that way. Right?
And what do you mean?
I know I don't believe that we have a spark. I don't believe that there is some sort of soul or free will. I'm an indeterminist. I'm not a determinist. But that doesn't mean that I act in the world as if I believe that. I act in the world by the accordance of my beliefs, and I don't need those beliefs to act in the way that I act, where I hold humans valuable, where I care about my own life, and I hold people accountable for their decisions and not their decisions without needing that in place. So to say that is kind of a little disingenuous about my experience and the experience of many others who don't believe that.
I guess what I'm saying, though, on that point is that I think we're saying the same thing. Actually, I think that you're saying that you believe that people are valuable. At least what I just heard you say is that you believe that people are valuable, and that you believe that people are more valuable than trees or rocks or animals. And what I'm saying is
depends on the capacity of what we're talking about, right? Particulars matter, but
not all.
I'm just saying people do matter, and I do behave in the world like people very much matter, but I don't believe in these sparks.
Yeah, and I'm saying that's the problem. I mean, that's what I'm trying to highlight.
Okay.
I don't think that's an issue with atheism, though. For instance, I'm a moral realist, but I'm an atheist. I don't think that God accounts for that. I actually think that God is going to stand closer to some kind of a subjective view on this, right? So, when we're talking about realism, we mean that there's there's two notions of it. The first one is that there's you have a proposition, and what's the truth making conditions for that proposition? The moral proposition would be something like I shouldn't murder and kill kittens for fun, right? What's the thing making that true? If it's something like an agent, like the attitudes of an agent, we're going to be some kind of a relativist, right? God is an agent, and according to the Christian faith, he makes every proposition true. All of them are true only in virtue of God and his attitudes and his minds, his nature, his desires, those sorts of things. And all of those things are exactly what we would say about a relativist. So Don might hold that the moral propositions are made true by his attitudes or someone else's attitudes, but all of these are exactly what we would expect under relativistic view.
I'm not sure this comparison works because as on the physical level, all agents are subjective by nature, but God is just theoretically speaking, is a fundamentally different type of being. He's he's an objective agent. So you're kind of I'm not saying you're doing this on purpose, but it's kind of squirreling in the implication because that agent inherently means subjective because that's what it means for all human agents, which are the only agents that we really encounter. But the idea of God is to be, yes, an agent, but to also be an objective one.
What does that mean?
I would say that. What do you mean? What does that mean?
What does that mean? What does it mean? When I say objective, I mean there's two notions of objective. There's the mind independent objective, or there's stance independent objective. God satisfies neither of those conditions.
Brett is telling us in the chat because he doesn't want to speak up. Let's not get too lost in definitions. What do you want us to stay focused on, Brett?
Yeah.
Say something.
I guess my 2 cents, I didn't want to talk over anybody, is the notion that there is some kind of morality that exists. that it is significant in how people interact with one another because of progress and what can't happen when crimes occur. But I would basically submit that it's a human universal. Thou shalt not kill is not something that any religious sect gets to own on its own. Human societies that have had that violence from political groups, from religious groups, whatever it is, that's a human universal thing that you can't have functioning society and civilization without thou shalt not kill.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Just to be clear, I would not start my argument with it's in the Bible, therefore it's true. I would start my argument with it's in reality, therefore it's true, and it's reflected in the Bible because God is the author of both. So there's no problem with that. In fact, the fact that there is universal objective morality is really interesting to think about, because how can we all understand when something is crooked unless we have an idea of what is straight? And where do we get that idea from, that we can actually know that it's better to love your neighbor rather than to eat them, for example?
But do you see my beginning dilemma there, where when the immediate moment someone says, I have the given dogma, this is the only one, all others are false, therefore you must convert to be with the one dogma that is objective, or whatever the word is you might use, because that always in history goes back to sectarian warfare, because the other never meets your standard of not something as simple as thou shalt not kill, but not following Jesus as the savior in Islam, not following Allah, that kind of thing. Do you see that the problem there?
Well, I think that what you're describing with the dogma, let's call it, of thou shalt not kill, though, it is something that, thank goodness, can be spread across the entire toast, and we wouldn't want it only to occupy a small corner, because it makes the world a better place.
And the Bible does say that, like, as far as I'm aware, is that it's not just Christians are made in the image of God. All men, all humanity is made of the image of God and has a spark of the divine and is therefore inherently and transcendently valuable. Like, I'm aware that some religions don't believe this, but nothing in Christianity says that thou shalt not murder only applies to fellow Christians, as far as I'm aware. I think it's a universally applicable proposition.
I want to add to that too. That's a great point, John. I want to add that I think that a lot of times the way that people view things is that it begins in the book, that there's this character inside of this book called Yahweh, and that character reflects certain moral values and duties. And that's just simply not the Christian understanding. The idea is that God is the author of reality. And then there's a manifestation or a particularization of what is reality like, how should people live, how should people not live, what are some basic guidelines to make life a place where humans can flourish as opposed to destroy each other. But it doesn't begin in the book. God is the author of life, the author of reality, the author of human consciousness. The book is a revelatory document that parses out some of those particular details and gives people guidelines, but it's not like the conversation begins inside of the chapters of a book.
Even flourishing.
I'm just not sure why God would be necessary for any of this. Like, I've actually never read. I read quite a lot of philosophy, and I've never read a good defense of this idea. Not even once. The whole idea that we need we need to have the straight in order to know the crooked. Well, then how does God know what's straight, right? Well, because He is straight. Well, is that how you would know it, right? You're gonna have a point where you cut off, and then you have to say, well, how does God know what's crooked? Because He's not crooked. Do you have to have that exist in order for you to know it?
Yes, because well, let me explain this. This is actually a really good point. So at the bottom of all worldviews are foundational beliefs that are just accepted as brute facts. That goes for.
That's not true.
So just to unpack the point, and then I want to hear your thoughts, but just to continue that thought really quick. So I would argue that at the core of atheism, let's say, or you guys, some people don't like that term, so naturalism, materialism, whatever. There is the accepted brute fact that there is something that eternally exists that is not God. Some people say it's the quantum wave. Some people say it's this thing called nothing that's not really nothing. But you boil down, and if you don't want God to be in the beginning, then you are having something else be in the beginning.
Yeah, but
And
first
it's
of all,
just
I
sorry,
just
really
say I
quick.
don't know. I keep it unknown, right? But you're not talking about a first cause. You're not talking about a deistic God. You're talking about Jesus. You have said
Well, it's
that you
important
you had a
to.
personal experience with Jesus. So if you're going to try to argue a non-biblical argument for God, you're going to have to. There's a pretty big leap there between a deistic notion of God, like Spinozan God or first cause God,
Even
to Jesus as is only known to you by a book. How you can't just throw that book out and then still plop Jesus in here, like like let's be intellectually honest.
So first of all, Jesus is not only known to me by a book. Second of all, you're right. There is a huge chasm that we just jumped from. The point that I was making, I wasn't talking about. I was not making a case for Jesus as God, but I do also believe that for various other reasons that I do want to get into in a second. But right now, but I don't have to make the entire argument at once. Right now, the point that I'm making is that it is utterly absurd to place anything in that original causal position besides God. It's utterly absurd.
No, it's not. What if you don't place anything in there?
Then you have achieved nothing.
No, that's not true. I've achieved an understand. Like, so this stinks to me of like Descartes' problem with indubitability. He so did not want to be wrong about anything that he posits like the cogito as the point from which all knowledge and like coherence comes from. But he himself failed that project. That's called the Cartesian circle. So the question becomes: if we do have to contend with our ignorance and our finitude, we don't plug God into the equation. We recognize other philosophies, other notions of knowing. All right, start learning between where our falsehoods lie and where our truths lie, and build off of that. And that is modern society. That's what we have learned currently. So I don't see why you need that, because many thinkers, many people have done amazing things without needing that point of that Archimedean lever by which you can move the earth, that point of knowledge, that beginning to make sense of anything. I don't think we need that.
People have gotten very sophisticated at being able to stand on the shoulders of giants and pretend that they can fly. But just saying that 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4 doesn't achieve anything. You're not.
Who said that?
So, who said what?
Who said 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4?
No.
Well, yeah. So someone can explain that.
Well, I think the idea is, and correct me if you're wrong, is I've just been talking to Don for a long time, so I think I can translate. I think the idea is that essentially, you can say that you don't. You can say that you're finite. You can say that you don't really know anything, that you really question everything. But if you don't have a general map of the world, it's basically impossible to move. It's impossible to act. So you can say that, but in actuality, again, this is the Petersonian point that nobody likes, is that you don't act that way. And part of the reason you don't act that way is because you have built-in assumptions built up from history that are so normalized, that are so fundamental, that we let them fade into the background, but still continue to inform our behavior.
There's this weird pretending that I see, though, that there's either theism or there's realism, and that's just false, right? Again, you don't have to be a materialist in order to be an atheist. For instance, Schopenhauer was a staunch atheist, not a materialist at all.
Sure.
Another example, Bernardo Kastrup, atheist, not materialist. He's an idealist. There's lots of versions of this where you're not where you're not some staunch, you just think the physical is the only thing that
There are
exists.
many,
This is
in
false.
philosophy, there are many ontological positions that don't hold a theistic or deistic standpoint.
And I'm a realist about knowledge, too. I think we do have knowledge. I just don't see what God's role is in any of that. I've never heard of a good explanation.
I just wanted to respond real quick, Brendan. Just 1 second. We'll give you the floor. I just wanted to respond to John about. I'm not saying that I don't know anything. I know plenty of things, and I believe knowledge is possible. I just don't believe that we necessarily need or even actually use this initial logical precipice of like God as the beginning of like knowledge. I don't think that's necessary. I think I can believe and have many assumptions that are real and that I know without that being there. And when I report to you that I don't believe these things, but I still have justifications to act the way I act, you're basically then telling me that I'm delusional, that I have no idea what I truly believe. Does that make sense? Like,
No, I
you're
understand
saying that
that.
because I behave in such a way, I must believe it the way you understand it, right? It's like
I
it's
didn't
like
say
it's
that,
like thinking that a duck understands coordinal planes because they know how to fly south, because
I
they
didn't say
act
that
that
about you.
way.
I did not say that about you personally. I made the
Okay.
broader point, and I'm aware. What I'm saying is that you have to have some a priori assumptions that you take on faith. That's
Does a
not.
duck need the a priori assumption of coordinal
Yeah,
planes to
trusted
fly
senses.
south?
Yes, a trusted senses correspond to reality.
It needs the
Also,
knowledge
a
of
duck isn't
it acts, it behaves as if it believes in the coordinal plane of like north, south, east, way.
I'm not sure I understand your point. A duck isn't conscious. It
No,
doesn't
no,
matter. It doesn't matter if it acts as if those coordinal planes exist because it flies south.
no, it doesn't. It doesn't need to know that the coordinal planes exist to fly
Yeah,
south,
exactly. It doesn't
because
need
it doesn't.
consciously know it,
So
but it acts.
knowledge in that isn't necessary for me to make sense of a situation. That's how you've understood it, but it doesn't mean that because I behave in that way, I secretly believe it inside,
I didn't say you secretly consciously believed in it. I didn't say that. I also
subconsciously.
said nothing about you personally, for the record.
Well, then I misunderstood.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the duck doesn't have to know or believe consciously in coordinal planes, but yet it always flies south. Yet it responds to reality because it has sense making apparatuses within itself that allow it to respond correctly to reality, even in ways that it doesn't understand.
So the duck believe in
That's
God?
right.
Like, is that where you were going with this?
No,
Brandon,
no.
you were
This
going to
is
say
all
something and we cut
genetics.
you off.
I mean, I thought the comparison was kind of bizarre. I'm just trying to answer.
The duck definitely believes in God, by the way. But no,
No.
what I was gonna say, do you guys surf? Does anybody surf?
My father and my brother do, so I've done it a few times. Not the best at it, but when I was young, I used to surf a
Bodyboard.
lot.
Does that count?
Okay, well, I want to give a surfing based analogy, so I was just looking for that connection point. But so there's a famous surf documentary called Endless Summer, made like back in the 60s, and there's a scene in the movie where these two, I think they're Hawaiian surfers, arrive at a remote island, and they're there with the islanders. This is a documentary, and they ask the islanders, "Is there any surf on this island?" And they say, "No, there's no surf here." But they're like, "I think I can." It looks like there would be. I don't know. Let's go paddle out and see if there is. So they paddle out and they paddle out, and sure enough, they surf for hours and hours. They have an amazing time. They come back and they tell the people there, "You guys, there's actually surf breaking on that reef off of the island." And they come back to the islanders, and they go, there's no waves here. And they respond, they say, "Well, whatever you want to call them, they're fun to ride on." And I
Okay.
use that analogy with how I view this thing with God is like we can argue about it in the abstract for as long as we want, but there's a point where in order to test it and actually experience God, you have to paddle out. If you remain on the shore and debate the plausibility of God in the theoretical, you will never know what it's like to taste and see that the Lord is good.
Well, I was
Well, if we could
extremely
taste and
religious
see
during
it,
my
that'd be an
teens.
empirical investigation of it, wouldn't it? So, but that's the thing that you said we don't have is that not all things are empirical. So why challenge empiricism if you're going to make a sort of an empirical claim there that you have to go and test it? Like,
Yeah,
surely
so
you don't
that
test God, right?
well, so that I'm quoting scripture there, and the usage of taste and see in that context is metaphorical language, but it's the idea of experientially know, not just ideologically argue about.
Yeah, but I mean, but my point is that tasting and seeing in any empirical investigation into it is supposedly the thing that I think I thought you were challenging at the initial, like the onset of this conversation, is that there's not going to be some empirical endeavor that's going to demonstrate the existence of God.
Yeah,
But
again,
then it
sorry.
seems like now you're saying that it's empirical, like it's experiential, which is what I mean when I say empirical.
Yeah, and that's what we should distinguish between there, because there is experiential that is not empirical. And although the language taste and see is I mean, what is a metaphor? A metaphor is something that is not the literal thing that is being referred to.
So are you arguing for some form of like sensus divinatus, to where there's
Here's how I would put it. To explain this idea. So right now, what's happening is my throat is vibrating, my noise is coming out, a lot of technology is happening. You guys, bones in your ears are vibrating, and your brain is processing that vibration. And somehow, and this is not even the point that I'm making, but somehow language is flowing through, ideas are flowing through, and we all can know the difference between what I'm doing right now and what I'm about to do. Damba di do hamba da da da, because we know the difference between just noise and language, right? And things that contain meaning and truth inside of them. And so, but this is what's really interesting. If I'm talking to my wife, for example, all of that is what's happening physically. But if I tell her I love you, through those physical mechanisms, something makes its way down into her heart, and she knows something that's different than if I said I hate you. And it's not just like the chemicals in her brain responded differently. She has gained a knowledge through language that contains an idea that goes straight into her heart. And the thing with God is that he doesn't need the physical apparatus. It's like, think of all of reality as like a cell phone, and you use this to interface into text through. But we imagine are a species that doesn't need to use this particular physical device. God is a species, if you will, who doesn't need to use the physical universe as his device. He's able to translate that message directly to its final destination in the human heart.
And you know that because you experience
I was
feelings?
about to say, how do we know that?
Yeah, so this is the interesting thing is that this is what Christians have been claiming for 2,000 years, times the millions and millions and millions, because they've paddled out to that reef and they've seen that there's waves, and they have been able to taste and see in that sense that the Lord is good. And I know it sounds like a crazy claim. I mean, if you haven't experienced God, I understand that it literally sounds like a form of psychosis, but it is a dramatic point to highlight that this is exactly what Christians
But I
are
have
saying.
experienced God. I just realized after a while that I wasn't experiencing God. I was experiencing other things and called it God.
Oh, I didn't know that. Were you raised Christian?
Not Christian. I was very Orthodox Jewish during my late,
Okay.
early teen years and late teen years, from around like age like 12 to around age like 20. I was I was put on tzitzis every day, pray 3 times a day, study Torah, Gemara, everything. I grew up in Israel. I was very, very, very much, and I thought that I as well experienced Hashem's Shekhinah, as it's in Hebrew, or God's like light or divinity. I thought I experienced it, but I know that I didn't now.
Yeah, I don't know that you did either. That's you're in such a hard position, bro.
Why am I in a hard position?
That type of upbringing is extremely difficult to.
No, it was by volition. My parents didn't grow up secular. I went to a summer camp and decided to become religious and took it on myself because I was convinced by the arguments laid before me by the community that I had.
You were convinced by the arguments for Orthodox Judaism?
I mean, I was Jewish, but I was convinced, oh, this is the way to live our life. They explained to me what God was, the arguments for God, how it makes sense, the philosophy, the history, the traditions, how it elevates your life. You know, I would engage in prayer and community and all that stuff. And I decided to become religious. And I went and I spoke to my parents and my brothers, and, you know, and kind of like our family became religious. And then as I grew up and learned more and more, I kind of pulled myself out of it. But I thought I experienced God. Of course I did.
What aspect of that experience did you think was God?
Well, it was a true, sincere belief, one that like empowered me every day, gave me direction, right? Gave me meaning. It was a sensation of of belonging and trust and all these other things that come along with that.
You're saying that come with the belief?
Well, the feelings that come with the belief, yeah. Because once you believe hard enough, that's what you feel.
See, I think this is really interesting, because I think that is a little different than what I'm saying, because I do believe that belief itself and actually basically religious activities themselves do hold a power, and I think that's why that's why people are diehard within Islam, for example. You know, I don't believe that they're worshiping a God that actually exists, but they really, really do. And I think that there's a something extremely compelling about some of the things that you just mentioned. But I do think that's different than what I'm trying to describe.
So what are you describing specifically?
Well, may I ask a real quick question? Just really
quick.
Go
ahead, Thomas.
What about your personal experience has proven to you that personal experiences can be trusted? As in, we know that we have cognitive biases. We don't remember the past properly. We have all of these issues with personal experience, but your foundation is based on personal experience, right?
No, it's not. This is why when we were talking about the origin of the universe, you know, like that's one topic, and then we then someone said, well, don't you believe in Jesus? And now we're talking now I would just say we're in the category of me describing my personal experience. But this, I mean, there's Mormons talk about having a burning in the bosom, and there's different personal experiences. I'm not saying that the center of Christianity is personal experience. It's definitely not. I'm just saying that there is a reality to where when a person comes to God through Christ, there is a connection that's made that once it has been made, it is undeniable. I mean, I know me, I know the way that I have been my entire life, and I know that I'm a different person before and after Christ in so many different ways. I could talk about it forever.
Do you believe that you can be wrong?
The only way that I could be wrong is it's like, it really is like asking me, like, do I believe that I'm not married to my wife, or that it's like, if I'm in a simulation, or like, we could go into like a very philosophical, theoretical for that.
But let's stay on the personal experience, because that's where it really matters, right? Like, that's where your personal experience with God is your proof, is it not?
I actually wasn't using it as proof. I was just saying that the claim that Christians make and have been making for the last 2,000 years is this dramatic claim of actually being able to say, I once was blind, but now I see. I once was dead in my sin, now I'm alive in righteousness. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Like, people, I think it was St. Augustine talks about the soul is ever wandering and roaming until it comes home to God. And that's what Christians have been saying. I'm just trying to highlight.
That's beautiful poetry, but I mean, we need to understand, like, fundamentally what personal experience can actually prove to us. You know what I mean? That's why I question it. I'm not trying to beat you up, but
no, you're good. You got to paddle out, man. Like I said, like, if like there is something to this. Like, if God wanted to beat everyone over the head with his reality, then the universe would look very different. You would have, Jesus Christ is Lord written on the DNA of every single cell, and that's not the case. There is a reality to God where he actually has. And now I would say this. Let me say this really quick for you guys. There's an interesting part in the scripture where Jesus is asked, "Why are you always talking in parables?" And his answer to that question is very interesting. He describes that he is concealing things from people who don't have ears to hear in a merciful way. And that's a very interesting point, because it tells you something about God's heart. Is he's not, like I said, he's not a bully who's going to force something on somebody. He's actually aware that our free will plays itself out in the real world in such a way that if he was right there in front of us, then we're actually heaping on ourselves, basically.
Yeah, but I feel like we have moved so far away from not only the beginning question, but now from even substantiating why is it that you believe what you believe. Like, we began this. We began the conversation with talking about the lowering of churches, and really moved off. Like you said, in the northern hemisphere, people have lost the belief in God, and we didn't really address that, which we could chalk up to a myriad of issues like education, access to the internet, longer lifespans. Like, we can all of that, and that could be one aspect. But now we're also kind of moving away more into like, this is who God is. God is love. God is just. He's not going to be tyrannical. He knows you have free will. It's more preaching now, as opposed to actually dealing. Like, we kind of moved from like a philosophical argument to a deistic God to the Bible, but then away from the Bible, and then to personal experience. Now we're completely off personal experience.
Not to mention the peculiarity of some of the claims along the way, like the whole communication analogy just made no sense. Like, I'm going, like, if I had two possible worlds, one has God and one doesn't, why would I expect that this other one somehow doesn't have communication? There was a claim that there's only one way to.
So I guess we're just looking for, because I think we're just looking for a let's follow through the conclusion, right? So is it personal experience? Is it a combination? Like, can you distill it for us in a way that's more direct, if that's, if that makes sense?
Distill what in a way that's more direct?
Why do you believe this? Like, why do you believe that? These sparks inside of us are indeed Jesus, as opposed to a deistic God, as opposed to just your sensations? Like, why is it that the duck believes in God, and why is it that you believe in God, and we all technically act as if we do believe in God? Like, let's hear it.
Okay, amazing. So let me start, now that I'm getting more of a read on your backstory, personality, etc. Let me start from this vantage point. There are things that are in the real world that, if God does exist, he becomes like a Rosetta Stone and explains simultaneously a bunch of different aspects of reality in a way that is sensical. If God does not exist, you have to piece things together in a way that is way more complicated and far less sensical. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about morality. I'm talking about existence itself. I'm talking about human dignity. I'm talking about even the existence of beauty. I'm talking about so many different dimensions of reality. If God exists, then instantaneously that makes sense of all of these different realities. It makes sense that humans have dignity, and that we're, like we were saying, how are we different than the rest of creation? Well, it would make sense if we actually were made in his image, which is what the scriptures say, that he's breathed into.
Okay, so let me see.
Can I continue to just
Okay.
Yeah, so it would make sense that human dignity would exist if we were made in his image. What is a human? How is a human different than the rest of creation? People say, you know that we're 99.9% similar to apes. And I say, I wish we were 100% similar, so that we could see that the difference between us is not a material difference. There is something different about human beings. And that's just on the human dignity point. But the same I'll let you get to what you were going to say, but the same is true for morality. And really, I want to go back to existence itself. It's either there's some just random energy or rock floating in nothing for no reason, and all of a sudden you get all of the complexity in the universe, or God.
I'd like to talk about that one too, existence.
Yeah, so
I don't think in principle God can explain existence. That's not even a coherent concept. So in order for God to explain anything, he's going to need to exist, right? And so if God already exists, he can't explain existence. It's going to be some sort of like co-extension of him at best, right? But we can't have something that you can't have something explain something else and that thing not exist at the same time. So God can't explain existence. That's incoherent.
Yeah.
Well,
let me just real quick, Brendan. I wanted to highlight three things that I wrote down. You started out by saying that because it's more complicated, it's therefore either should not be believed or is morally bad or wrong in some sense.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, you said, let's start with the fact that when we don't believe in God, we don't have God at the bottom. We have to make it so much more complicated to make sense of it. Did you not say that?
Yeah, I was basically getting at Occam's razor, or the number of different problems that you have to solve once you subtract.
Sure,
that.
but that doesn't mean that just because it's more complicated, it's therefore wrong. If I can actually account for it in a proper way.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Right, okay. And then human dignity, we went back to the human thing, but we already went over that, where I said we can look at humanity and recognize our uniqueness and our difference more than just observing our biology. Our spiritual aspects, the fact we have religions, the fact we have art and painting and complex societies, and we transmit information and have mimetic notions within our society. We can understand that we're very unique without appealing to God. Like, I just wanted to point that out.
That we are, but we can't explain why we are. That's what I'm saying. I agree that we are different, that we are unique. What I'm saying is that if you subtract God, you can't explain why that is the case nearly as effectively.
I don't know why God would make a difference there. Like,
why does it? Brett wants to.
Why does it, Brandon? Why does it matter? The morality, is there. It's like I was trying to talk to you earlier about Hindus being equal to Christians, to Jews, to Buddhists. The primary point is thou shalt not kill. Like, we're talking about worlds you can't prove. Maybe from your experience, you were converted to Christianity from your experiences, but there's no proof there, and the religious sects are killing one another throughout the centuries over this question, because we say which tribe is more moral or better than the other. Am I wrong?
So it matters. I want to answer your question. It matters because explanatory power matters. What it sounds like you are saying, or I forgot who it was, someone was saying is, yeah, it just is what it is, bro. And what I'm saying is that's not a sufficient answer. That doesn't answer the question, why is it what it is? And God does answer that question.
I don't see how.
Why? I don't understand why you need to ask why. Why assumes agency. It assumes autonomy. It assumes that there is a reason for it being so. It might not have a reason being so. Can you demonstrate in some sort of way that we must ask the why question when talking about the origins of universes, the origins of morality? Do we need a why there? Can't we just explain it by how and how so, or how come?
Yeah, I'm just saying. I mean, you're free to stop there if you want, but I'm saying for me, it's a you asked why do I believe what I believe, and my answer to that question is that for me, it's a problem to not get down to the explanatory power level of something. For me, it is a problem to just say, yeah, it just is what it is. The universe just exists, or morality just exists, or human dignity just exists. For me, that's just not intellectually satisfying. For me, I want to know,
I agree.
why is the world the way that it is? What could possibly explain the real world that we live in? What I'm saying is that God is a phenomenal explanation. And like I said, a Rosetta Stone that everything is downstream from.
Brief interjection, and this is just my personal experience. My problem wasn't just that it was intellectually unsatisfying. My problem is that if you can't answer the why question about some of those most fundamental aspects of humanity, then they essentially hold no weight. And that was really difficult.
But do you guys acknowledge that humans use that to create power over one another? That they legitimately don't try, like they try to say for better things, but it's literally about a power grab.
Yes, but that's not really relevant to this conversation, because all that's saying is that, well, let me explain.
Sorry, my bad.
All that's saying is that something has been played out poorly. That's not a reason to not do it. That's like saying that if someone plays Beethoven poorly on the piano, that we should throw out Beethoven.
I understand. I see where you're going with that. I'm not trying to make it a rebuttal because I don't want it just to be that, but my point would be Africa 200,000 years ago, we are a species that somehow ended up here. We have some, scientific evidence, but the fundamental moral is that the things of racism, of sectarianism, of dualistic, binary us versus them, continually stems because even if there was some kind of creator in the universe, it's pushed off of us interacting with each other enough that it's just us doing it. And that the idea of humanity coming from Africa could be a uniting factor to where to say, hey, we are actually more related than we want to admit. Whereas if you continue down the path of and I promise I'm almost done, if you continue down the path of sectarianism, isn't that just perpetual warfare?
I am not a fan of sectarianism, but truth matters. And the second thing I would say is that more people were killed in the 20th century than all other centuries combined, once Nietzsche predicted the idea of God being dead and atheistic regimes took precedence. So there's not a dichotomy between only violence is done in the name of religion, although I agree with you that violence is done in the name of religion, but to point to that, it's really human nature is the problem.
It's funny that you bring up dichotomies when you're consistently dichotomizing between if we don't have the answer to why, then the dichotomy is that nothing matters or something like that. Or if we don't have this God point, then from downstream we have no good explanations. You're consistently dichotomizing it.
There's another point where I think he's being inconsistent
point
too.
is not,
he objected to for instance, you guys seem to say that maybe moral facts are brute, but at the beginning of this, he was saying that there's going to be something like God that is brute, but God is identical to goodness in his view. Presumably,
can you take that out of like philosopher jargon?
Oh yeah, mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, thank you, please.
So the issue is to say a brute fact is just a fact that lacks an explanation. At the beginning, Brandon was saying that he thinks that the universe is going to have this sort of brute fact, this fundamental fact that just doesn't have an explanation for it. He thinks that's God. God is identical to goodness. And earlier, you guys pointed out maybe these good facts, there's goodness in the universe. Maybe they're just brute. Maybe they just are what they are, right? They just force their ways in, sort of thing. Like, but God is presumably what it means to be good. Is God. God is the good thing, and so He also believes in a brute goodness. And it's ironic that He would object to you guys saying goodness is brute when that might even be a point to His favor.
Yeah, but the problem with that, and I don't even disagree with that, but it's just that a value is something that's derivative. I mean, what does it even mean to say that a value just there's just this thing called goodness that just exists?
So generous, yeah.
But what I'm saying is, how what does that actually mean? Like, tell me more about that.
So This comes from like schools of thought from non-naturalism. I was previously non-naturalist, so this is going to get into some high-level stuff. I don't know if you how well you
Dumb it
read
down,
you
Todd.
are.
Remember, dumb it
I'll
down for
try.
me.
I'll try. I'll
Dumb it
try.
down
So
for me, please.
something being sui generis, it just means that it just is, right? So it's going to be fixed by the natural facts from most views. Like for instance, Russ Schaefer Landau is going to say these moral facts are going to be put in place. They're fixed by natural facts, but there's no specific natural fact that they're going to be reducible to. So what that means is something like think utilitarianism. Utilitarianism, the J.S. Mill version of utilitarianism is that goodness is identical with happiness, and so it's reducible to what it means to be happy. So goodness is just happiness. This is reducibility. The non-naturalist is usually going to be a non-reductionist. So they're not going to hold that moral facts can just be reduced to happiness or pleasure or just some random other facts. Instead, they're going to say that every given explanation of what it means to be good is going to be explainable in virtue of something else that is itself good.
So in
And
light
so
of that,
it's just going to go back and it's going to be
Yes.
an infinite set of normative facts.
okay, so in
Um,
light of that, can you frame that in the context of a story? So you're saying in the beginning was goodness.
well, Plato might say that. I don't personally think this. I think you think this, though, right? Like God is good. And that doesn't mean God doesn't have the predicate, the quality of being good, as in He does good things. God is good, as in God is identical to goodness.
Goodness is a direct derivative of God's unchanging nature, but He is not an ideal. He has a personhood attached to Him. He's a personality. He's a person. He's not a ethereal ideal of goodness. So goodness is a it comes directly out of His nature, but that's not
I'm
the
only
same.
familiar with two ways to do this. So when we say God is good, that is can take two forms. It can either be predicative or it can be identity. So for instance, I am tart. That's an identity relation.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
am a man. That's a predicative relationship, right? So I have the property of being man. I am tart is I am identical to being tart, and I might lift off my other properties, and that property set might be identical to me. So I'm
Yeah.
just asking, is God good? And when we say God is good, is he identical to what it is to be good, or does he have the predicate that he behaves in good ways?
The point that I'm making is that it's reductionistic to say that God is just good. God is just this ideal thing called good. I'm saying that's reductionistic because He's a lot more than that. And if He were only this abstract ideal called good, that was exactly what He was and nothing more, it would be completely nonsensical as it relates to an explanatory factor for the universe and for existence.
So God is predicatively good. So God has the quality of behaving in good ways.
And much, much, much more. Goodness is rooted in His nature, but again, this is very reductionistic, and it doesn't really explain anything. I want one of you guys to explain to me the beginning of reality without God. That's what I want. I want to
I don't
understand.
I don't
I
have the
want
view on
someone.
this. So
Which
Well, just
modality or which
because,
lens?
hang on, slow down. Just because we can't explain something doesn't mean that that other thing is true, right? That would be a fallacy.
And that's exact. And I'm not saying that that you need to. I'm just saying the fact that you can't, for me, was not intellectually satisfying. To be able to say, well, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. I don't like this 4 character, this God character, and I don't really know what it equals. So I'm just going to leave the
Yeah,
classroom and not
does
look for an answer to
does
the test.
intellectual satisfaction denote truth?
So I would argue that there are answers. Now this is interesting, and this is not an argument because it could be seen as a circular argument, but because I do believe in God, I also believe that there are answers to the questions. That's not why I believe in God, but you can see how if you did believe in God, you would also believe that there are answers to the questions.
So is the
I mean,
main
I do
reason
believe there are
personal
answers. Me not
experience?
knowing them doesn't mean that they're not there, and me not being able to explain it doesn't mean, in principle, my view can't do so. It just means I don't know how to do so yet. So, for
Yeah,
instance, if I'm a moral realist, I may not be able to explain the totality because I'm somewhere I'm somewhere between some kind of a non-naturalist view and another view called constructivism, and I don't know which one I think is more likely. Just because I don't know how to explain it just yet doesn't mean that I'm committed to that I need to commit to some other position. Like, say, for instance, let's say Don here makes the same argument. He says your view can't explain moral realism, so you should be a relativist. And I'm like, that doesn't follow. In fact, I think there's really good reasons to deny relativism. I have specific arguments against it, and in the same light, I have arguments against Christianity that I think are more persuasive than any sort of explanatory power could have. And I don't think it has particularly strong explanatory power for most of these topics. For instance, existence, it's not very well explained by God. Morality is not well explained by God. That's usually birthed from some sort of a classical view on.
Can we go one at a time on these? Can you?
Yeah,
Can
I just want to quickly,
I'm going through the
one
list
second,
that you
Tar. I
made.
just want to make sure we are hitting an hour of you being on the show, Brendan, and we don't want to take any up on your time. And if you're enjoying the conversation, like how long do we have you?
We super appreciate you, by the way.
Yes.
No, I mean I'm enjoying the conversation too. I feel like we need more time because I feel that we're scratching the surface, and I think that maybe one of the problems with this conversation is that I feel like we're flying over a number of different topics without getting to the bottom of any of them. So maybe can we just focus in on what you just said? Sorry, I'm leaning in for your name. Tart.
Yes. Okay.
So you said God is not a good explanation for existence.
Correct.
Say more. Help me out there.
So there are some simplistic problems. So for instance, for X to explain Y, X will need to have some kind of existence, right? So it's not meaningful to say that X explains Y, but X doesn't exist. This is a simplistic problem. So if God is the explanation for existence, God needs to precede in some sense Y, right? So if Y is the existence and God is the X, God would need to exist. Otherwise, God doesn't exist, right? If he doesn't exist, I don't know how he would go about explaining it. But if he exists, then he can't explain existence because he already has it.
So I love that you just said that, and now I feel like we're going somewhere, because what I'm saying is that in light of what you just described, any other X but God is absurd. But the very definition of God is an uncaused first cause. And this is what I was trying to say an hour ago, is that something has to be eternal. It's either God or it's, you tell me, a rock, what is it? What
Well, Brandon, if I may, just real quick, Brandon.
I don't know. I've given you a reason why it's absurd. Sorry, go ahead, Tom. It's my bad.
It's okay. It's all right. Tart was saying, God damn it.
I was saying God's a bad explanation for existence because you're just going up in a circle. It's not explanatory at all.
That's the thing, is that if what he's saying, Brandon, is Tart, God already existing can't be an explanation for existence because God already, do you understand what he means by that?
Yes, but it's not sensical, because anything that you put into that X category, you run into the same dilemma. And the reason for that,
including God, that's the problem.
No.
I don't think that's explainable.
No. This is the problem. Something is eternal because of what you just laid out with your X's and Y's.
I don't have to hold that nothing is eternal to be an atheist. You do know that, right?
I'm not trying to convince you to not be an atheist. I'm just trying to reason with you. Something must be eternal because there is existence. In light of what you just said.
I don't have there are other options. Like, for instance, you could have an infinitist view. You might say the total set is eternal or something like that. You could have there's theories of temporality right now.
What is an infinitist view?
Oh, infinitist with respect to ontology, this is different than epistemic infinitism, but
talk about it in
ontological infinitism is just that there's an infinite set of causal features like universes.
You're going off the philosophy train.
Sorry.
Bring it back in terms of justification. No, bring it back. Thomas just said it right. Bring it back in terms of justification.
Yes.
Okay?
So, real quick, there's three types of justification chains: foundationalism, infinitism, coherentism. One is circular, one is infinite, one has a by definition unjustified first necessary foundation. That's why it's foundationalism. So which one is it?
Who's that directed toward?
It doesn't matter.
Okay,
go ahead.
I lean foundationalist with I'm a weak foundationalist. So epistemically, I think that there are within our knowledge set there are a set of features that are more central to it, but those themselves don't have explanations, but there are explanations why they don't have explanations, so they're not dogmatic.
Sure.
And I'll leave Brandon if he wants to.
Yeah, let Brandon go.
What's your answer?
Yeah, I what I'm trying to say is that I think where you were going with, you started to talk about the multiverse theory a second ago, And what I was going to say is that we don't really have evidence for that, and that requires faith to believe. And even if you do believe it, you're still in an infinite regression loop until you get back
Yeah.
to what I'm trying to say, which is.
But you said it was the only option. I was just listing other options, alternative to yours. I was like, there's lots of other options.
But what I'm saying is that actually isn't getting us back to the beginning, which is where I'm trying to take us. That's just saying that somewhere along the way there was multiple universes. I'm saying, okay, let's keep going back. Let's keep going back.
No, and that's the problem that I was trying to highlight earlier with bringing up Descartes' cogito, is that if you're gonna go into a like causal chain, right? Turtles all the way bound. We go. There's an issue here where we're not actually able to make sense of it. We can say God and just put a check mark and move on. La di da. We've solved the problem, or we can understand our finitude and simply say what we're talking about are boundaries of unknowing. So when you look at like comparative religion studies, a lot of them talk about God as an unknown entity. That's how they use the word God. But your notion of God doesn't just simply say unknown or the moment by which we logically can know we're stuck in a reductionist repeating decimal logically, whatever it might be. You're not saying that. You're saying that specific thing is I experienced it as Jesus Christ. I want to make sure that we understand the veracity of the argument to what the actual belief is.
Yeah, so it's possible to like partition a conversation into different pieces, and I'm not like what I'm saying right here. I think this all just let's just leave it here. This conversation can stand on its own 2 feet, logically speaking, as far as I'm concerned. And additionally, yes, I do believe that God incarnated himself, that he actually entered the human story, like Shakespeare writing himself into Hamlet, that he actually put on flesh and walked among us, that he actually lived the perfect life that we could not live, that he actually is like a hero in the human story. And that through his life, death, and resurrection, we can actually be reunited to that first uncaused mystical whatever you want to call it, that X that you're talking about in the equation.
That's the thing I want to know, though, is like, why does there have to be a first cause? It seems as though you're a foundationalist, and Tart says he's a weak foundationalist. So you agree in some senses that there needs to be some kind of inference.
We're mixing ontology and epistemology here, I think.
Yeah,
Thomas,
I am.
By the way.
I'm crossing them.
There's different for the audience, just so that we're clear. The type of thing question Brandon is asking is an ontological question, and sometimes we're talking a little bit about epistemology. So when we talk about explanations, that's an epistemic thing, which means how we know something. And then when we talk about how things are, so for instance, the universe having an infinite set of other universes that came before it, that's ontology. So we're sort of blending. We're mixing.
Well, we are blending the two because epistemology isn't.
Epistemology
requires. Yes, but epistemology requires an ontology. You know what I mean? I think so anyway. So, if you're both foundationalists, where do you disagree?
So I'm a weak foundationalist with respect to epistemology. I am not necessarily of a specific brand when it comes to ontology. I don't know what my view is on that right now. I don't know that I have one.
Okay, so now back to my question, just real quick, and I'll be done. So you're a foundationalist in the fact that God is the first cause. Do you believe that God is the first cause?
Who's that directed toward?
You, that Brandon. Was you. I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't mean to cross all the streams here. Go ahead, Brandon.
Are you asking if I believe that God is the
uncaused
first cause?
Yes,
absolutely.
First cause. Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually going a step further. I'm saying that is the only coherent solution to existence.
So God needs no other explanation. He can exist as a cause that is unjustified by definition.
You got to start somewhere, and I'm saying any other start point is absurd.
Okay. I find God to be an absurd starting point, to be honest.
Yeah, how do you delineate absurd versus not absurd?
By absurd, what I mean is that, again, like a value or just a fleck of matter or something that is derivative in nature as a first thing is illogical.
Why? What's the contradiction?
Because derivative things don't begin things. They are
well, you're making an assumption, right? That you just begged the question. So when you say something derivative doesn't begin, it doesn't have it doesn't start things. We're asking about the start, and the reason that it can't be the start is because it's derivative. That's circular. That begs the question.
So what is the thing that you're saying is the start then?
I don't have a view on this. I don't think a mind makes sense though.
Well, what I'm saying is that by derivative, what I'm saying is things that we know are in the world and that don't have any creative power, to say that they are the first thing is the problem. That's what I'm trying to say. So
yeah, I'm pointing out that.
Yeah, but you said but you said you said that because your thing is if we don't have them, then we can't make sense of things. And well, why don't the things make sense? And your answer is because a derivative can't be from a derivative, right? That's what Tart is highlighting.
Yeah,
why doesn't it not make sense?
Circular.
So you guys are arguing that matter is eternal.
No,
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I'll be honest with you.
Okay, because to me, I hear what you guys are saying about my comment about there being something derivative, but what I'm saying is that you asked the question, what do you mean by absurd, or what's your definition of absurd? And what I'm saying is something that doesn't have any will or volition to choose to create, something that doesn't have intelligence or creative apparatus to be able to create, something that doesn't meet any of the criteria that would make creation reasonable, just matter or energy or some ethereal good idea. Those are absurd because they don't possess the attributes that would make creation possible.
Yeah, but remember, we don't believe that it's creation. That's you're building in some assumptions that most of us are just not gonna like. I don't think the universe is
existence. Sorry, existence. Sorry, the cause of existence. Just
existence can't be caused. That's not a thing.
Okay, the cause of reality. How do you want to phrase it?
Yeah, my point is I don't think there's a satisfactory way to phrase it that will not beg the question. I think there's probably going to be some kind of an assumption that you're just kind of lacing in there going, God must have called the universe.
No, not really though.
There's going to be a good explanation.
No, that's not really the case though, because do you agree with the claim that something must be eternal, which I've made a few times?
I don't know about that. I have no idea.
I don't know.
So why is that confusing to you, or why are you agnostic about that? Give me a scenario where that's not true.
Well, I'm not aware of any good argument that leads to that conclusion. Like I think that I think there's other arguments. Like for instance, if you combine like Bertrand, and this is gonna go back to actually your initial position, because saying something is brute doesn't necessarily mean it's eternal. As an example, so for instance, Bertrand Russell would argue that he kind of played off Leibniz, and he says that the only explanation for Leibniz' bootstrapping problem, which is the idea that if we take all of the facts in the whole everything that exists, and we call that the universe, right? We call all of existence the universe, whatever those facts are, and then we were to try to explain those. The thing explaining that can either be one of two things: a fact or not a fact. It's not a fact, it doesn't exist, so it must be a fact, right? But that's going to be a member of the set of things that we just talked about, right? All the facts, that's the universe. And so he would argue that there's not in principle an explanation for all the set of facts. It's just not a coherent notion to think that there's going to be an explanation. And so he thinks that the universe is just a brute fact. Like all of the facts that exist end up being brute under this sort of a system.
So let me get you straight, Tart. You're saying, you're just to understand you, because I want to understand. You're saying that because of the totality of saying that everything, and then saying, well, the cause of everything is this one thing, is a problem because that's contained within the everything. So that would say the thing caused itself, and it's not an explanation. It's just saying the thing is the thing, and because the thing. That's what you're saying?
Yeah. Also,
exactly. Hold on, really quick. Yeah. Right in the middle of that, there was a technical glitch. So I can you repeat what you just said?
Me?
Yeah. Sorry. It like I froze for like a second on.
Okay. Yeah. So we have a set of all things. Right, yep. And that would include your conception of God, because that's all things,
everything.
And to posit God as the explanation for all things, and that's would mean that it's a different set of all things, which is a problem, which means it's no longer a part of everything.
Yeah, this is the point Tart was making originally about 10 minutes ago. Yeah.
Okay.
So, was there a question, or are you just saying?
Well, I was giving you examples of alternative positions that are just like not there being like this eternal thing, right? All the facts, like it wouldn't need to be eternal.
Okay,
it could just come about. We don't, and without like temporality, eternality doesn't really make a lot of sense either. So
okay, so let's go to that then. Let's go to that, because I still what you were just saying, as far as I understood, and correct me if I misunderstood, is that we simply accept the universe as a brute fact.
I'm giving alternative options. You're saying there is this only one option, that there must be something that's eternal, and I'm going, well, there's lots and lots and lots of other options, and
but
there's just no reason to accept eternality.
But the one option that you just gave is not how do I say this? Just saying the universe is a brute fact doesn't really achieve anything. I don't really understand that. That's just that's not an explanation.
Would it be something else besides brute fact? Your answer
Well, that's what I'm asking.
There are theories in physics that the universe caused itself. By the way, that's a fairly new one because essentially within physics, there's ways in which space-time can bend so extremely, and this is crazy, but it can bend so extremely that it can come back and cause itself, and that's insane.
That's what
Yeah,
they think.
I just say to myself, I'm a dumb human, right? I make proclamations of truth all the time about things that I can't even know. So I just go, okay, so in this case I don't know it, but I can still make sense of tons of things. Right? That's the point.
So, but saying to me, I'm just telling you guys where I'm coming from.
Yeah, of course.
For me saying, yeah, the universe just is what it is, or the universe created itself. Therefore, you're saying really the universe is the first uncaused cause.
So what we're really asking here is, does it have to have a meaning? Does there have
Well,
to be?
No, it has to have a logical explanation.
An explanation.
Why?
Okay.
Why?
Well,
No,
does
why does
God
it
have,
need to?
does God have a logical explanation though? If the answer is no,
yeah.
then you don't believe that.
Well, no, but God is not a created God. God is not cause. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly. It doesn't have a logical explanation though. So you don't believe the first cause needs an explanation. So if the universe is the first cause, then it just follows it doesn't need an explanation on your.
But what I'm saying is that God is a logical explanation compared with a material universe for the same reasons I just listed.
Yeah, but tons of things can be logical explanations.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. I'm trying to dig for something that makes sense.
How about what you can take a phenomenological approach to it and say what we call God, we're really talking that's the end of our sense making apparatus with trying to comprehend existence as it is, and what we're calling God, a logical explanation of that is just what we refer to as like epistemologically and ontologically as unknown.
Like
and
the noumena.
The noumena, right? The thing in itself. We might just not have knowledge of it and call it. That's a logical explanation. You don't have to agree with it, but I can give you logical explanations. You're saying that they're right.
I feel that's a sidestep, not really an explanation. That's just saying our powers of knowing are limited, and I don't feel that that's an explanation.
I think it is. I think it gives us conceptual utility when we go ahead and just talk about morals. I think it was conceptual utility when we go ahead and talk about science. I think it gives us conceptual utility and moral utility with understanding our incredulity, our ability to be fallible in the world. I think it has a lot of cool explanation and real utility. It's not just like a statement without any derivatives, like you said.
Yeah, but that's
okay. So really quick, what are you saying has all those benefits?
For example, understanding that the things that we discover about humanity and about ourselves and our moral codes can be wrong and need to be put into question. We can recognize that when we look out into the world and see a discrepancy among the moral attitudes and behaviors of people, we can account for it other than just humans don't have God in their heart. Right? There's real pragmatic mechanisms that we can try to understand the world by, and it's not just scientific.
Yeah,
right?
we're way downstream though from the existence or reality topic when we're starting to talk about that stuff. And if we were to look at some of those particulars, like I could maybe see where you're coming from on some of that. But what I'm trying to say, and I've enjoyed the conversation a lot, and I'm learning from you guys as well on some of the terminology and things too, which is cool. And John is falling asleep.
He's just listening intently. That's John's face.
John is our political guy. John's
been trying to get in, but we haven't.
I like to I'm a philosophy guy too, but
can I
philosophy, less ontology.
Yeah.
Well, so what I would like to do is to circle back because I think I don't sense that what I said has yet been understood necessarily, or at least giving it like maybe a refutation to this or something. So what I'm trying to say is that just calling the universe a brute. Here, let me just do bullet points. Just calling the universe itself a brute fact is not intellectually satisfying for me personally. I want to know, is there something that holds explanatory power beyond just, well, it just is what it is and just shrug and move on. So that's the first point. The second point is, what could be logical and an explanation for the universe? And we've thrown out the idea that universes create universes. We've thrown out like a couple different ideas. But for me, what I'm trying to say is that in order for that first thing, and I know, Tart, you were saying, yeah, but God is something that needs to be created. How do you explain God? What's your explanatory power for God? And I hear what you're saying there. But what I'm telling you is when you get down to the very bottom of the well, at some point you are faced with that crazy mind-bending reality of what was the first thing. And what I'm trying to tell you, though, is that God, because he has a will and can choose to create, because he has apparently the powers to create. He possesses attributes that would make the real world that we live in, with things like humans that can think and reason, and where there's things like love, and where there's insane complexity inside of everything, including the cell, and vastness out to the stretches. If you look at the real universe that exists and you look at this idea of God, what I'm saying is it's more logical that all of what is came from a being like that than to say, yeah, it's kind of like evolution and all just slowly from simple to more complex over time and billions of years, and we need a couple more billions of years. But really, this, whatever your X is in that equation, a rock, a piece of matter, another universe, whatever your other X is, I'm telling you, doesn't make sense. At least
Yes,
not.
Brett, 1 second. Brett wanted to say something.
Specifically.
Slow down, guys.
Oh, go ahead, Brett. Sorry.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, cool. So then, Brandon, if I'm following you right, does that mean that the necessity of accepting Jesus as your savior comes down to rectifying for original sin from the garden?
Whoa. How did we get there from what I just said?
Yeah.
Fill out the gaps for us, right?
Because my perspective, like I said before, about all humans from Africa kind of thing, is, again, I try to get to the root of the sectarianism. Because for me, the sectarianism, even within Christianity, even within Islam, even with, Palestine and Israel, that is the problem. It doesn't matter where the origin came from the infinite, from God, from whatever else. What truly matters is the interaction between one or more people, and how that will either sustain the species or how it will destroy us. Because I see the sectarianism continuously just going down the road of fighting.
Yeah, I don't like sectarianism either. I don't like evil. I don't like religious wars either. I would push back on saying that that's all that matters. I do think that truth matters. And if it's true that God is the best explanation for the universe, then that still matters, even though as people have groped in the dark at that and have totally, like I said, played Beethoven really, really bad.
I share your love for truth. And if God is the truth, I want to know that.
Right on, bro.
I actually quite think that the truth here is that we have to reject the notion that we are going to know this capital T truth. And I think to plug God in there as a intellectually satisfying endeavor, as opposed to the other ones, kind of supersedes, and not to be insulting, is has a little bit of hubris behind it and sounds very non-Christian to me. In my conversation with Dr. Cornel West, he made it a big point to say that as a Christian, I am fallible. As a Christian, I could be 100% wrong about the belief in God, because what we have to understand is that we're all broken men, and that's the angle that he took with his radical Christianity, as he calls it. And I find you being a bit guilty of that sentiment.
Oh, what sentiment is that again?
That you believe that the truth is that God is the creator of the universe, as opposed to understanding yourself as a fallible, broken human.
Well, I'm definitely a fallible, broken human, and that's why I love Christianity, and that's why I love Jesus, because he forgives. But I think that what you just said, that the only truth is that there is no capital T truth, is apparently your capital T truth. And if you're offended by me saying that God is a logical source for the universe, then I'm offended for you for saying that I can't believe that.
I didn't say you can't believe that, and I don't think there is a capital T truth. That's not my capital T truth, because I don't believe in capital T truth, right? So I do not believe that the capital T truth is that there is no truth. I reject capital T truth, while asserting that the best way to think about the issue is by rejecting capital T truth.
But what I'm saying is
we're going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole with this.
That's a truth claim.
We're going to be going.
It's a truth claim, but it's not a capital T truth.
What does it mean?
So and if it's not a capital T truth claim, then I will just make it lowercase, or I'll actually make it say false.
My response to the previous statement about any X other than God doesn't make sense. My response is just that God as being X also doesn't make sense for the reasons I've listed. It ends up being circular.
Can I really quick?
Well, I do want to say that we have 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes left for the show tonight, guys, and it's great this conversation with Brendan. We're gonna finish with you strong, and we always
can always have it back on.
We can have it back on another time.
We can always have it back on. I think we should. I've loved it. It's really fantastic.
Can I ask you one last question, Tart?
Sure, go ahead, man.
So specifically, I hear what you just said. You're like, yeah, I get it. Like, things are confusing, and God doesn't really move the needle for me any more than any other X within that equation that we're talking about. But as it relates to the few things that I've mentioned now, several times about the idea of something having a will and needing to choose to create, something have a mind that is actually capable of creating a universe like the one that we live in, and that X being of a personal nature, so that those things are possible. What would be your response to that?
I just don't think that it makes sense for the thing to be to have a will or to have to choose to create. Choice is presumably choice is going to be a change from a state of not having chosen the thing to the state of having chosen the thing. But changes between two states requires two different temporal points, right? But this is supposedly going to be a God that's not going to be spatio-temporal, right? He's going to be some sort of atemporal being, so he can't, in principle, make choices because choices are two different states of intention, right? And so those two states of intention, he has to change from one state to the other. Changes a temporal sense there. So what was the temporality that he occupies? He doesn't occupy one, so it's not a good reason to think that God has a will.
So can you say that a little bit more dumbed down?
Yeah, I'll just tell you.
Tart, you gotta strip away the Ben Shapiro philosophy talk. Okay, you can't have the Ben Shapiro philosophy. We don't allow
it. I just want to understand the point that you're making about your. So what I'm saying is that because there's something, the first X can't just be some material thing, because that's not a cause. Like it's illogical. We kind of went through that whole path, but you're saying that it's problematic.
All I was going to ask is God spatio-temporal?
Yeah, is God a space? Is he like a? Does he exist outside of space and time? Is the question.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So that's that I'm making an objection that would be reasonable. So think about it like this: if I make the choice to pick up my glass, I've picked up my glass, and now I make the choice to drink.
Mm-hmm.
There's a state of being where I had not chosen, and then a state of being where I did choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those two different states of being are separated spatio-temporally. That's how there's a difference, but there's a distinction between having made the choice and me not having made the choice.
Mm-hmm.
God has to be non-spatio-temporal, so it's going to exist outside of space and time, and so there's not going to be a distinction from the point where he makes the decision to the point where he didn't, or where he didn't make the decision, or vice versa. So if there's not going to be a distinction between those 2 points, then he didn't make a choice at all.
But there is a distinction.
What is it?
The universe.
Well, that would be spatio-temporality, but he doesn't exist within that. And that the whole idea of will is to have a distinction between a state of intentionality and what you do, right? Like I've got to have the intentional state to pick up my glass, make the choice to do so. There's a distinction between the first state and the second state.
Yes,
that's separated by space and time.
And that's what I'm saying, though, is that the creation of the universe was that picking up of the glass, if you will.
So it wasn't a single point to you?
What wasn't a single point?
The beginning of the universe. There's not like a single point. There's two.
What do you mean? I'm just
saying.
Maybe
you're not understanding the objection. I don't think you're understanding the. Maybe you're not understanding the.
I'm saying the moment. I'm saying the moment that God chose to create. That moment, that single point, was the creation of space, time, and matter.
But he still exists.
I'm saying that moment. That moment is if it's a temporal moment, maybe you're meaning moment in some other sense. If it's a temporal moment, there wasn't a state before that, right? Because there's no before.
Well, there is. This is what again, when you get down to the bedrock of something, there is eternity before, but the beginning of time. Because you have to have, in order to have time, you have to have matter, and in order to have matter, you have to have space, right? Like those two things coexist. Like physics shows this. But the idea of that X that we keep going back to, this mystical, mysterious X that no one can quite wrap their mind around, that the very idea of that X, whatever it is that it's eternal. That's why I keep saying something must be eternal. That's like kind of the main point that I'm trying to drive home. Number one, and number two, God is a more logical, eternal thing than any other.
Yeah.
Thing.
What's wrong with that which is eternal is something that our trans theist said. The eternality is our relationship with the unknown. We'll always have a relationship with the unknown that is eternal from human experience, and you're just calling that God.
That's more that's almost more religious. I hear what you're saying with that, but I'm actually trying to understand, how do we have the reality that we have?
Yeah, but you're not using mechanisms that actually deal with reality. You're using mechanism that deals with your experience and your relationship with it, right? Like if I was to,
I actually hesitated to go into anything on a personal, experiential level, because I feared that particular straw man.
I apologize for that. It wasn't my intention.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's just I realize now that I'm getting to know you guys better that it's probably better to not include that piece because I think that it's will be difficult to not imply motive or like reverse engineering from that beginning point. But what I'm trying to say is
understandable.
Purely intellectually, just my mind. I'm not talking about like my heart or my love of God, my experience of God. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying my mind. To me, it is far more logical to believe in this, the idea of God, and in particular, the way that He is presented within the person of Jesus. To me, I'm just saying that is a far better explanation than any other X for a number of reasons. I feel like we are kind of going in circles, but that's
we're going in a circle. Well, we are also okay. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our show. Brendan,
we need more time.
We need more. I know we can do it again. I think I think it was a civil. I think it was a civil conversation. What do you think? You're up for round 2 in a few.
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, we want to thank you so much for coming on, and just a little bit of housekeeping before we end. There are new live events, so if you're trying to go ahead and see Lawrence Krauss,
also promote Brandon's stuff too.
Yes, Brandon's gonna give us closing. Good. He's gonna close it out for us. Go to pangburn.com/tickets to get tickets for your events in Vancouver and 2 events now in New York with Dinesh D'Souza and Cosmic Skeptic, as well as with I think who else is coming in? Lawrence Krauss is going to be in New York City and in Vancouver, so very much looking forward to
Nick
that.
Pope. I also
Nick Pope, yeah.
That's a temptation. Don, are you going to be there?
In New York, I think I will be. I mean, I live in New York. Why would I not show it?
That's the real draw. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Brandon, what are your last thing? Where can people find you? Plug you? Go ahead.
Yeah, the YouTube channel is called Daily Dose of Wisdom, and there are actually a lot of people on both sides of this conversation that tune in there, that comment there. And that's very much in alignment with my heart for the channel. I don't want to have it be just an echo chamber. So all are welcome. I love thinking through these ideas together. And I believe that the truth will out in time. And really appreciate you guys having me on and being able to have this type of conversation at what is now 10 p.m. Sunday.
Same for me.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Brandon, for coming on. And we'll keep in touch and we'll do this again another time.
Sounds good. Have a good one, guys.
You too.
Thanks, man.
Great talking to you, man.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you guys. Peace.
Okay, guys.
So cool to meet him. I've been a long
time you can hang up. You can hang up. I tried to disconnect you.
Yeah.
That was a good conversation.
Been a follower. It's so cool to meet him because I've just been following him for so long on YouTube. And I never thought
I didn't even get to cover
it's cool.
Yeah, I didn't even get to cover like 10% of what I wanted to say to him. So,
well, I think we had a good time.
Yeah, there's a lot of us on here trying to jump in and have good. I still think it was good chat. It's good chat.
No, I think it was a great chat. What are your takeaways from the conversation before we end it? Everyone, take your turn. Brett, Thomas, John, Tart, me. Let's go ahead and finish it up strong. I'll start. I think that one of the biggest issues dealing in this conversation is that there was a difficulty of just addressing the claim specifically and kind of like consistently doing, well, it's because of this, and that's because of this, and that's because of this, which is because of that, which leads us back to here. And while we were trying to offer, I know you were trying to at least start when he said, well, what are the other explanations? Like, well, there's tons of other explanations. But I think that what Brandon was trying to say is there aren't explanations that are satisfying to me, which kind of takes the position almost like the default position.
Which is an argument from personal incredulity, and I didn't want to be rude, but that's what that is.
Well, I mean, that's a little bit of a dumb down. He's not just claiming that because those explanations aren't personally satisfying to him, they don't count as explanations. The point he was trying to make is that I from what I understand, this is my impression of the conversation from what I understood, is that a lot of the alternative explanations were more just explanations of our own ignorance than explanations of like the actual thing. And to him, those are not just make him feel different, although they do. Those are actually fundamental different kinds of things. It's not really a direct alternative. It's just a reason to give up, essentially. I think that's a little. I don't think it just comes down to just the fact that he didn't like them. I think he thought that those were fundamentally different ideas.
But he said they were intellectually non-stimulating, which is what I understood.
Well, that was definitely.
Yeah, he also he said that none of them were satisfying, and he gave throughout the conversation. He gave several different examples of what he means by not satisfying. One, he said it was incoherent, and one time he said something else. And now I think you have, in order to make that kind of argument, you have to have properly examined every other position. So every position I gave should have had an explanation as to why he didn't believe it. Right? I don't have a great explanation for why I don't believe some of these positions. Like I don't see any contradiction. I don't think we have any evidence to support it, but I don't think there's any sort of like a contradiction. Presumably, if he's talking about this position from like a priori sort of position, so he's not talking about an evidential approach where he's gone out there and he's researched the world and he's looked at it and said, here's the explanation. Instead, he's going, oh well, all these other explanations don't make sense, and so they need to have some kind of like a contradiction or something like that in order for him to come to the conclusion that his position
he hasn't
right.
examined all of the other possible. He
didn't even know
one has. No one has.
That he didn't know.
Well, guys, it is 10:01 and the show is done. So as always, we'll be here again on Sunday next week. Go get your tickets at pangburn.com/tickets. Great Events Vancouver, New York City 2 events, Dinesh D'Souza, Cosmic Skeptic, Lawrence Krauss, Nick Pope, Travis Pangburn, Lawrence Krauss in Vancouver. We'll see you then. We'll be in the Discord in about 10-15 minutes for the after show. If you all want to jump in, the link is in the description, or you can go online and just look up Pangburn Discord. Just Google it. You'll find it. Or go to the YouTube channel.
Someone come yell at me.
Someone come yell at Tard and tell him he's a heathen.
Someone come yell at me. Everyone yells at me after the show. I love it.
Yeah, and I also want to thank Brett for coming on. And in the chat, you guys didn't see, put a lot of work in the back chat to make sure that we stayed on topic and had good questions coming through. So with that said, everyone, have a good night. And we'll see you again next time this Sunday. Peace out, everyone.
Night, guys.
We need to be able to have conversations without feeling like we're going to say something that gets us thrown in jail because people happen to be offended.